We'll make that decision as the campaign continues. I want to be the face of this campaign, and I don't want any distractions.
That was Ohio Democratic Senate nominee Tim Ryan, one of a number in his party that's taken a careful approach with aligning himself too closely to President Biden. There, he wouldn't commit to appearing in public with the president. But Biden's popularity is the highest in a year, and things seem to be turning around for Democrats. Here was Tim Ryan this weekend.
President Biden is going to be in Ohio next Friday to participate in the groundbreaking at a new Intel semiconductor manufacturing facility. Will you be there with him?
Yes, I will. This is a huge opportunity. This is the biggest, most transformational economic development project in Ohio's history. I will be there.
So, what changed? Earlier this month, when historically red Kansas turned out in record numbers to vote down an amendment that would have given the state the power to outlaw abortion, we wondered on this show whether abortion was going to be the breakwater issue for the Republican tidal wave heading toward Capitol Hill this November. Now, whether we can point to abortion or not, that red storm has unquestionably turned into a light rain shower. New poll numbers over the weekend show that the GOP losing its once certain grip on congressional control. 538's predictor now gives Democrats a 64% chance of keeping control of the Senate, up from 50% just a few weeks ago. And the Washington Post reports that Democrats see a path towards actually keeping control of the House. A new CBS News poll shows Republicans predicted to lead down to just 226 seats, a 12-seat gain in the House. But it's 70 days until the midterm election, a lifetime in politics. Things can change in a moment. Joining us now to talk is Julia Manchester from NewsNation's partner, The Hill, who's out with a new article, 5 Midterm Lessons from this year's special election. Julia, good evening.
Good evening, Chris. Great to see you.
Great to see you, too. So, Julia, I mean, things have changed dramatically in the last couple of weeks. You know, what do you think is going on in this country?
Look, I think the last couple of weeks we have seen a number of different events that have been very good for Democrats. You have seen major legislative victories for Democrats, like the Inflation Reduction Act being passed. You had that abortion ballot vote in Kansas, which very much went in Democrats' favor. And you've also had a number of special elections in states like Alaska and in New York, where you've seen Democrats come out on top. In particular, in New York, we know that in the 19th congressional district, for example, that was very much viewed as a bellwether. But you saw the Democrat in that district, Pat Ryan, focus on abortion. In fact, hours after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade earlier in June, we saw Pat Ryan come out with an ad. And that was sort of defying the conventional wisdom that a lot of campaigns were putting out, saying focus as much on inflation and the economy as possible. But it seems like in a lot of these races, the issue of abortion is breaking through. And I think in particular, it's breaking through for a lot of these suburban swing districts, a lot of these districts that may have swung for President Trump in 2016 and then in 2018 and 2020 swung back towards Democrats. So we're seeing in these districts, you might have someone who is maybe more fiscally conservative, for example, and may be concerned about inflation, but is also concerned about the issue of abortion and access to reproductive
Or maybe they're just waking up to the
healthcare.
fact that if they're waking up to the fact that the president doesn't necessarily control the economy, we live in a capitalist society. The Ryan race is a very important example. He was down 8 points at the beginning of June, and he won by 2.5 points. That's a 10.5-point swing. There aren't a lot of seats in this country that could support a 10.5-point swing in either direction. So it's an interesting bellwether, an interesting case. Two very good candidates, neither one of them extremist. But I do think, and I wonder what you think about this, are the extremist views on choice and other things coming from the right scaring suburban voters to the point where, economy be damned, they're going to vote Democratic this year?
You know, it's very possible. And I think you are starting to see Democrats lean into that message of labeling Republican candidates as, MAGA extremists, for example. And we saw the president really have a lot of that messaging in his speech in Rockville, Maryland last week. He got a lot of criticism for labeling those voters as, extremists, MAGA extremists. However, we are seeing Democrats start to maybe potentially see some benefit to that if they're trying to appeal to these suburban voters. And however, if Democrats are going to do that, I think they really need to back it up, and they're backing it up right now with abortion. I also don't think the legal problems that President Trump is having is helping Republicans much. I think you're going to see Democrats very much talk about, the importance of protecting democracy, whereas Republicans would say this is about election integrity, two different types of language there. But overall, I don't think Trump's legal issues, though I want to make this clear, I don't think Democrats are going to campaign on that. I think they want to stay away from that. I think they want to tie these candidates to Trump, but it's a fine line.
I think the Republicans thought they were going to campaign on that. I don't think they're thinking that after the Ryan victory in New York. I think that was a big wake-up call for them. In the Senate, candidates matter a lot more than they do in the House. And we're looking around the country right now, and you're seeing just a variety of extremists, whether it be Dr. Oz or Herschel Walker or just bad candidates. I mean, I don't think Dr. Oz is so much of an extremist as he's just a bad candidate. I've never seen such a bad candidate, quite frankly. What do you make of these extremist and horrible candidates being nominated in the Senate? And you think that's why the Republicans ultimately lose the Senate?
It's been interesting. We've been following the Senate candidate recruitment process on the Republican side since last year. And you saw that Republicans were really trying to get people like Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, Doug Ducey in Arizona to run for Senate. And none of these candidates, Dave McCormick obviously lost, but a lot of these potential candidates didn't want to run for Senate. So we saw that the GOP appeared to have some sort of, recruitment problem. And in some cases, you saw that in a primary environment, when you get the more extreme voters, whether it's Democrat or Republican coming out, they wanted someone more like Dr. Oz, who was endorsed by Donald Trump. Someone in Ohio, for example, J.D. Vance, someone who was endorsed by Donald Trump. So you have that recruitment problem. A lot of, the NRSC, Rick Scott in particular, has gotten some criticism for that. And, look, I think the Senate is just a harder battlefield than the House is for Republicans. I think in general right now, the Senate, Democrats have very strong candidates, and you have Republicans sort of struggling right now. That being said, though, and you mentioned this earlier, Chris, a lot can happen between now and Election Day. Yeah. We have the month of October, so October surprises, beware, very much could be about. Yeah,
I mean, 70 days is a lifetime in politics. Anything can happen, but they're not going to change candidates. I mean, Herschel Walker is not going to wake up tomorrow with, a degree in physics and be able to kind of talk to the issues the way he should running for Senate. I don't think so. We'll see what happens there. Why do you think that they had such a hard time, the GOP, recruiting those quality, typical GOP candidates?
From my vantage point, I noticed that a lot of governors were trying to be recruited. So you had Larry Hogan in Maryland. I talked about Ducey and Sununu in New Hampshire and Arizona, for example. And I think when you're governor, it's a very different job. You are the head of your own state. I mean, obviously, you have to answer to the legislature in your state, but you very much are in your own lane, and you are very much seen as a top figure in the state. When you go to the United States Senate, though, it's a very different ball game. And, you're a legislator. You're not dealing with the kitchen table issues that may impact your state every day. You are talking about sausage making in Washington. And right now, we know that Washington is, not the most attractive person for a place for a lot of politicians or people looking to get into politics.
Let me ask you one quick question on the way out here. 12 seats is a very small majority for Kevin McCarthy. I think it might be too small for him to actually be Speaker. Is there any possibility, if there is a division within the Republican Party, of there maybe being a coalition government between Democrats and Republicans in the House? Or is that just out of the question?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I don't think I've heard a coalition government and Republicans and Democrats used in the same sentence for quite some time. Look, it's really hard for me to see that in this political environment right now. You know, I think Kevin McCarthy will do all that he can to become Speaker. I think it's something he's had his eye on for quite some time now. And we know that Republicans have been pouring so many resources into these House races. So I never say never, but at the same time, it's something that from my vantage point right now, I don't really see happening.
With a 12-seat majority, you only got to pick up 7 to change the balance of power. So who knows what happens? Julia Manchester from the Hill, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.